Daria. Welcome to Scrum Mastered video series where I give you practical tips on how to build awesome teams. In today's video, I wanted to talk about the new Scrum Guide 2020, the changes that have been made, and more importantly, how does it actually affect you as a Scrum Master and what you should start doing right now, given that the new changes have just been released. Let me start this by saying that Scrum is still Scrum. Yes, you will see a lot of changes in the new Scrum Guide, but at the end of the day, the values, principles, and the foundational concepts of Scrum are still there. These things didn't change. What did change is that Scrum Guide became much less prescriptive and more concise, to the point. So instead of having 19 pages in the Scrum Guide, now you have only 14, minus the title page, of course. It means that you will have much more opportunities to try and experiment with new techniques that are not really part of the Scrum Guide, that are not described, meaning that the Scrum Guide just gives you the framework, really much less prescriptive, and you will need to figure out with your team how can you implement those concepts and what practices and tools you want to use. For example, the concept of the 3 questions in the daily Scrum has been completely removed from the Scrum Guide. So you no longer have an excuse of just asking the 3 questions, and you need to start thinking about what should your team be talking about in the daily Scrum to make it much more productive and effective. In the same way, the recommendation around the team size from 3 to 9 has been also removed. It is more about the Scrum team being small enough to reduce the complexity and of coordination, but also big enough to actually complete the substantial amount of work. Usually less than 10, right? But the prescription around that size has been removed. At the same time, the Scrum Guide now gives you more precisely the rules of the game. Now, you can't really skip some elements because maybe they weren't defined as clearly before or they weren't explained as key elements of Scrum. Now they're clearly written down in such a way that you cannot just pass through them. For example, the sprint goal is a commitment. And the sprint goal is its own element, very clearly defined in Scrum. The same is the definition of done. The definition of done is also a commitment, very, very clearly defined by Scrum. So you cannot really just skip those items, and if your team technically is not following with those elements, is not actually creating those elements as they are implementing Scrum, then are they really doing Scrum? That would be the question. But I do not really want to go into the details of all of the changes that have been made in the Scrum Guide. You will see a lot of information about that in different resources, videos, and blog posts that are coming up from trainers. However, what I do want to talk about is how does this new Scrum Guide actually impact what you should be doing as a Scrum Master? So how does it impact you as a Scrum Master for your team? And I have 3 key points to highlight. Number 1, stay up to date. You are the embodiment of Scrum in your organization and for your team. So you need to know Scrum to be able to be a great Scrum Master. So you gotta read the Scrum Guide, note the changes, do some research, read additional blog posts that explain why those changes were made, and understand how does it actually apply in your context. Are you missing some key elements of Scrum that you quickly need to start implementing in your team? That will be an important point for you. So you cannot just sit around and say, well, I know Scrum from 2017 and this is the Scrum that I will be implementing. Remember, Scrum didn't change. It just became much more specific and precise while also being less prescriptive. So it's an opportunity for you to go back and understand the key elements of Scrum and start making sure that your team is actually following Scrum as it was intended from the very start. Number 2, you can no longer hide behind your team. The Scrum Guide version 2020 is very specific around the fact that the Scrum Master does not only work with the team, but the whole organization. So let me read from the Scrum Guide itself. Scrum Masters are true leaders who serve the Scrum team and the larger organization. And then from the next part in the Scrum Master definition, Scrum Master serves the organization in several ways, including leading, training, and coaching the organization in its Scrum adoption. Notice the focus on the word leading here, right? You are a leader that drives the Scrum adoption in the organization, planning and advising Scrum implementations within the organization. Once again, if it seemed like something an agile coach in your organization would usually do, now it is clear here that it is the Scrum Master's role to actually do that. There is no separation between someone who works with the organization and someone who works with the team. It's the Scrum Master. It's you. Helping employees and stakeholders understand and enact an empirical approach for complex work. This is very, very specific to you working with the stakeholders. It might be management, sponsors, whether it's middle management or executives, it's on you. And then removing barriers between stakeholders and Scrum teams. Those barriers we're talking about here are often communication barriers and misunderstandings between stakeholders, often middle management, right? And the team, the Scrum team doing the work. So it's once again on you as a Scrum Master to jump on it. And that is how the Scrum was always intended. It's just much clearer now around your involvement in the organization, not only the team. And number 3, you are accountable. This Scrum Guide is much more specific around what Scrum Master is accountable for. So let me read from the Scrum Guide to be more specific. The Scrum Master is accountable for the Scrum team's effectiveness. They do this by enabling the Scrum team to improve its practices within the Scrum framework. Here as we see the focus on the fact that the Scrum Master is not there just to coach the team, create good morale or environment. They are accountable for how well the Scrum team is actually doing, and also their continuous improvement. Right? You are accountable for making sure that your team continuously improves. This is not new. It has always been there. It's just much more specific now. You can't just skip through it. And then another thing that I wanted to highlight that is a difference from the other Scrum Guide, the previous version, is this. The Scrum Master is accountable for establishing Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. If you look at the previous version, it used to say the Scrum Master is responsible for promoting and supporting Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. You see the difference in wording here, right? Responsible, no longer just responsible, you are accountable, and no longer just promoting and supporting Scrum, establishing it, making sure that people understand and actually enact it, right? So here's the important difference that makes you much more accountable for your role within the organization and the team. If I go even a step further to look at what the Scrum Master is accountable for, in the Scrum Team section, it clearly says the Scrum Team is responsible for all product-related activities from stakeholder collaboration, verification, maintenance, operation, experimentation, research and development, and anything else that might be required. Because the Scrum Master is a clear part of the Scrum Team, and the whole Scrum team is responsible for those activities, you as a Scrum Master are also responsible. Which ones you'll be taking on? Well, that depends on your skill set, how you work with the team, and what other roles you help the team fulfill. If you're only really playing the Scrum Master role, for example, you're not a developer, well, you still have some very important points to work with when it comes to the product-related activities. Right? It might be related to the product quality through the definition of done and encouraging the team to improve it. It might be through the spirit of experimentation, making sure that the team understands how to better conduct the experiments, and anything that can be there. Maybe working with the stakeholders. Remember, removing barriers between the stakeholders and the team. Once again, this is a product-related activity that would help the team be successful. So you're accountable and responsible for that alongside the Scrum team in general. So here are my key points, but the question remains, is this all new? Well, no. As you've seen through this video, I talked about the fact that the Scrum Guide principles and key concept didn't change. It's still Scrum. They're just much clearer now. These things are not new. They always have been intended. Maybe they were misunderstood, we had some misconceptions around some of them. At the end of the day, we still need to focus on what's really important, and this is how Scrum was designed, and we need to follow through with all of those rules and elements, because if we're not following the rules, are we really playing the game of Scrum, or are we playing something else? You have a lot of work to do now as a Scrum Master, don't you? So what are you still doing here? Let's wrap up this video with some action points for you. Knowing what you know now, after this video, after reading the Scrum Guide or understanding some of the differences, what are some of the key actions, bold steps that you need to take, ASAP really, to be more successful as a Scrum Master and to help your team and organization be successful with Scrum? Leave your answers to this question in the comments below so that we can share what we think we should be doing with the Scrum Master community. If you like this video, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you're watching this at ScrumMastered.com, then make sure you subscribe to the newsletter where I'm sharing additional insightful tips and personal stories, as well as some special offers with my newsletter subscribers. I hope to see you in the next video. Cheers and Scrum on!